My name is Dawn Deboise. I was born to a very young mom in 1969. She was 16 when she had me, and she was a hippie flower child. And as much as she loved me, her priorities and her ability to take care of me, my father was not in the picture, were limited. But fortunately for me, her grandfather or my great grandfather, seeing the issues that she was having, I was in Florida at the time and he was in Maine, because that's what you did back then. When someone had a baby out of wedlock, they sent them far away. And he had me put in foster care back in Maine when he wasn't able to take care of me himself. And so my early years were a lot of back and forth between different foster home, my mother, my great grandfather. I didn't have one primary caregiver that I could depend upon. When I was 4 is when my mom died, and it was an accidental overdose with pain medication. And during a very difficult time in her family, my family, it was the day of my great grandfather's funeral. And so, which made it very traumatic for her mother. So there's just trauma, trauma, trauma everywhere. So her mother was not able to take care of me, dealing with the trauma of losing her only child on the day that she buried her last parent that had been living. So when I was 5, I went to live in a foster home that I lived in until I was 18. And it's kind of a dichotomy of, I was very fortunate that I was there and not bounced around a million times like I was when I was little. But there were also other things within the foster home that were very difficult and very confusing. And I didn't really understand why, growing up, because I felt like I should be grateful for everything that they did for me. But there still was this other side to things. And a friend of mine who I was close to when I was younger, she said, and she was just a kid. She's like, I was always confused and felt bad because, you needed a mom or you needed a parent, you needed a family, but they were so mean to you. And there's a reason I'm sharing all this, because a lot of that came back to me during my near-death experience. Fast forward to March of 2020 and COVID lockdown. And I have 3 adult sons who were all in their own individual stressful workplace situation all over the country. And they were at the ages, they were late 20s, early 30s, that I just could listen and support them. I couldn't solve their problems for them. And I also have a rare disease that I was supporting patients with. My rare disease is Lambert-Eaton myasthenic syndrome, which is very much like myasthenia gravis. People have to look it up. It's LEMS. And I was supporting patients that were also stressed by everything that was going on with COVID lockdown. So Saturday, March 20th, I had, a FaceTime call with one of these patients that lives in New York City. So New York City had been hit really, really hard, during COVID. And so I just was juggling a lot of plates and trying to not let the stress of what was going on in the world get to me. But what I ended up doing was I was internalizing the stress. So the night of March 20th, I woke up and it was about 11:30 at night and I was very nauseated. And I went to the bathroom thinking I was going to throw up. So I go to the bathroom. I didn't throw up. I sat on the toilet just to gain my composure. And all of a sudden I felt really lightheaded. And so, like a fool, I got up and tried to race back to my bed. And I need to lay down. But I didn't do what should have happened, which was my blood pressure was dropping. I was having a HOTS flare due to the stress. And I fainted and landed flat on my face and knocked myself out for about 45 minutes. And when I came to, I was face down on the cold hardwood floor. And I was a mess. My treatment and care for my post-concussion syndrome that I ended up having and the whole concussion experience was horrible. And that was because every doctor was concentrating on COVID. Every office had the COVID protocols. I had a neurologist already, which I thought gave me a heads up to everything because my neurologist treats my LEMS. I was wrong. So fast forward into June, and I was having a really difficult time. My face was healed, but I wasn't able to keep my kitchen cleaned up. I wasn't able to take care of my groceries. I wasn't able to function well. And then I had a weekend that I had three different types of emotional things happen. One that made me really happy, one that made me really sad, and one that made me really mad. The really mad was a friend had gotten fired from a position for very unjust reasons. And one that made me really sad was an experience with a homeless person in my city. Then the really happy one was I met Tatum. I don't know if you know Tatum, the rescue pit bull who does silly videos on TikTok. His owners live right nearby. But my brain couldn't handle all of those emotions all at once, still healing from my concussion. So I went into a period of a couple of days that I couldn't sleep and things were racing in my brain. And a friend said, you really need to call your neurology office and see if they can give you some meds to help slow down your brain. I called, and the neurologist that called me back, because it was the weekend, said, I'm here for emergencies. I mean, I'm in tears, and really brushed it off and said he would let my neurologist know when the week started. She didn't call, and so finally I had to call 911. I mean, my brain was such a mess, and so I called 911, went to the hospital, spent 7 hours at the hospital. They did a CT scan. They didn't know if I'd had a shift or if I had a brain bleed because of how I was acting, how I couldn't deal with light, I couldn't deal with sound. Like the worst post-concussion syndrome symptoms that you can imagine are what I was dealing with. Fortunately, there was no brain bleed. There was no, shift, midline shift or anything. And so at the end, they just sent me home to rest. So my son met me at the hospital and had driven me home. He helped me to log off of all social media. And the goal was, you just need to rest your brain. You need to not worry about the LEMS patients right now. You need to rest. And I called him the day after being at the hospital, and I couldn't hear a sound coming back at me without extreme pain in my brain. Like I couldn't listen to music that I didn't already know, because if it was an unexpected sound, I can't remember what the name of that is, that whole experience, but it was the worst. So I tried to talk to him on the phone and I couldn't. Everything he said back hurt. So he didn't call me to check on me. And I had to verify all of this afterwards because I didn't know what day or time or what it was when I came back. Went to bed Thursday evening, and I did not come to until it was late on the 4th of July, that Saturday. So it was like 2.5 days or a little over 2 days, that I was completely unconscious in my bedroom. So when I went to sleep, it was a very different falling asleep process in that, I saw the stars and all of this going on, and it was a weird falling asleep experience. But then the next thing I knew, and the next thing I can remember, is I was levitating above my city. Like I was above my city. There's a river, the Penobscot River, was pretty close to my house. I lived pretty close to downtown. And so I was levitating above my city. And then the next thing I remember is I was seeing all of the trauma that I experienced as a child, but understanding it as an adult, as a 50-something-year-old female. And it was horrifying to me because it was explaining why I always felt so uncomfortable with my foster family, what their motives were in behind things that happened. And, I was always made to feel guilty because this is what we're doing for you, so you should be thankful. But at the same time, there was abuse, there was SA, there were a lot of things, but there was also a strong motive. And all of that was explained to me in this first part of my experience. And so much so that the next part was, I remember going into this huge room, and part of what was explained to me was the mean things they had done to my real grandmother, my birth grandmother, who died the month I turned 18, who I still had a relationship with, even though I didn't live with her. And when I went into this large room, all these people came in, and she was coming in as well. It was like she was being pushed in a wheelchair, but I don't remember the wheelchair. But I looked at her like, really? Of what I was told. And she just shook her head, yes. Yes, that was true. And the next part was, I was like having a conversation with God. I was like in heaven, but I didn't want to see my foster mother. Like I didn't want to see her. I didn't want to be reunited with her. And I was told I wouldn't be, that she went to hell for what she did to me. So then I was asking, well, am I going to see Kenny? Kenny was my high school sweetheart who died in a car accident. He was 19 and I was 17. And they were like, yes, yes, you're going to see Kenny. And I'm like, am I going to see my mother? And am I going to see Lori, a friend of mine who died of breast cancer? And then I was like, am I going to see Princess Diana? Like, and am I going to see all my dogs? You know, I was just so excited about, am I going to see all these people? And the answer was yes, yes, yes. And I remember it was like this bright, beautiful, calm place. You can't really describe exactly what it was, if that makes sense. Because I was just focusing on, I got to see Kenny. Then in the conversation, again, this conversation would seem to be a lot of things. Like I was asking a lot of questions. I always had a lot of questions as a child about religion. So one of my questions was, you know, which religion is right? I'd always had that question. And God said, it isn't the religion, it's the belief. It's the belief in God that's right. And it's not just believing in God that brings you to heaven. You still have to be a good person and walk with faith and whatnot. You know, and then he explained, like, because I have a huge passion for music. And he said, yes, you know, that people that have a musical gift, they are gifts that he gives them. And the songs that people connect with are actually gifts from him, where he's speaking to people during their most trying times or enjoyable times. And so it was all this reminders of, yes, things that I've felt, it was true, you know, like that people are given God-given gifts for a reason, that music is published for a reason, like certain songs come into your life at certain times for a reason. But then we'll get back to Kenny. So I was so excited to be reunited with him. And then I was asked, do you want to see him as he would be now if he had lived and to be your age now? Or do you want to go back to being 17 and have him being 19 when, you know, the age that he died? And I was thinking about it and I couldn't quite decide. And then I was given, or do you want to go back? And I chose to go back. And I chose to go back. It was very scary and surreal coming to from all of this. At times I was in my room, like I could hear, I had an older pug who was trying to come in and wake me up. My kitten, who's now a cat now, was laying along my arm, but I could not wake up, could not wake up, could not wake up. And I even, you know, you saw Luna in part of this whole time frame when I was trying to come to. I knew that Rocky was going to die and that I was going to have a light colored pug. And now I have Luna, who is not your typical colored pug. You know, she's got her white face and her white body. And it wasn't until my bladder finally let go, because I had so much pain like in my back and in my hips. And when I started to pee the bed, I came to. And when I ran to the bathroom and my legs were mottled, absolutely mottled, because the blood had pooled in them. And it took me literally like a day to figure out how long I'd been out for, because I had to verify like when the last time my phone was used, when I last accessed internet, you know, like what really happened? Did that really happen? And I was traumatized by the realities of my foster family and the traumas of my childhood. But I was also comforted by the fact that there was indeed a life after, and that I would be reunited with those I wanted to be reunited with. And I was thinking about this morning because prior to all of this happening, I suffered from extreme anxiety, generalized anxiety disorder, and I don't suffer from it now either. You know, a few of the things that I learned during this experience, like I knew that Biden and Kamala were going to beat Trump in the first election that they were up against. That was weird. I was told I did not have to worry about COVID. I've not contracted COVID. Things that people that have never had this experience would think are crazy. I didn't really realize until the very next day when a good friend of mine who has a psychology background and he knows my rare disease and he realized how long I'd been knocked, you know, out for. I wanted to do a FaceTime with him for him to see me and kind of help me, because I didn't trust the hospital, because the hospital had really kind of brushed off what happened before. And it was right before that FaceTime call that, and this is little trigger warning here. I went to use the bathroom and I had a bowel movement that literally I filled the toilet bowl with blood because blood had settled down, around my intestines. And then I glanced down, one of my toes was still gray from being discolored from the modeling, the blood that had been pooling. And I mean, I was so close to passing away. If I did pass away and came back, like my physical body showed those symptoms that and it sticks with you. And the wild thing about these experiences, or my experience, but I think everyone else, is that it can happen 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and you remember every little detail. Whereas if you have a dream, you have to work to remember any details and you forget them over time. And that was what kept at me after this happened. Was this is not disappearing. This is not like a dream that just disappears in a little while. I mean, thinking about it just seems like the details are like yesterday.
If you like this story, be sure to support The Other Side NDE by checking out our brand new book below,